We are living in exciting times, and the midterm elections next week are all on our mind, and that's what we want to discuss today. And I have two exciting guests here with me in the studio, Celinda Lake and Ed Goeas, both leading campaign strategists for the Democratic Party and for the Republican Party.
I want to set the context a little bit, which is to say that the party in power in the first midterm election structurally always loses seats. The only time that hasn't happened in 36 years is when we had 9/11. Because voters want miracles and they don't get them, and then they take it out on the party in power. And I think many of your viewers may understand that feeling. But the economy is the number one issue. It has particularly soared at the end of the campaign. Rising cost of living is how women think about it, food prices. Men think about it, and Republicans think about it more as inflation and gas prices. Men in the United States literally know the price of gas block by block and look at it like every 2 hours. So inflation is really eroding people's confidence in their elected officials and their desire for change and their willingness to do a Hail Mary for change. There are other prominent issues as well, though. Abortion is playing a major, major role with women. It's a very big turnout issue for the Democrats. And right now, we're trying less to persuade the swing voters than we are to generate turnout of both of our bases. The Republicans are pretty energized. We have to get the same level of enthusiasm on the Democratic side. January 6th, as you mentioned, a major, major issue for Democrats in terms of energizing them to turn out to vote. Both parties very concerned about threats to democracy, but probably mean different things by that issue. Whatever happens after this election, a major concern that people are two major questions they're going to be asking. One question is going to be, who's going to make this economy work for me and my family? Who's going to stabilize the economy? And how do we get a democracy which is seriously threatened and a country that's seriously threatened by polarization and division back on track?
So on the issues, there's kind of two ways to look at it. One is look at the intensity of the issues. And yes, abortion is very high, but the economy, cost of living, and inflation is the issue out there. The other is to ask just what's your number one response? What's the issue you're going to base your vote on? And CNN yesterday came out with a poll that had the economy at 51%, including cost of living and inflation, had abortion at 15%, and had government and basically democracy at 9%. So, Republicans have been, I think, laser focused on the economy. I've been somewhat surprised by the Democrats. I think they didn't take Celinda, what she just said, they didn't follow what she said, which is whenever you're talking about the economy, especially if inflation is a key issue, not an issue specifically to the voters, but an issue in terms of political environment, men look at inflation, and if it goes up a point, down a point, that's what they notice. Women look at it in terms of cost of living. And what has surprised me is the Democrats have not, with women being such an important component to their coalition, they haven't talked about cost of living. They've really focused on the issue of inflation. And I think that has been a miscue in many of the Democratic campaigns. Abortion, we had built towards the end of the spring a very strong movement in our direction. Abortion came along as an issue. I think the Democrats played it well. That's where we saw both Biden's numbers improve some, particularly with progressives that were questioning whether he was pushing their agenda enough. And we saw that go through the summer. We as Republicans added one strategic move. As midsummer, we were seeing a little bit of an abatement of the abortion issue. They kind of went so heavy, so early, so hard, that I think they used up a lot of the energy. And we said, what's the next issue that's going to come along? And what always comes along with a poor economy is crime. And so we started talking about crime in early August, mid-August, before the crime numbers actually start coming out. And that has become a big issue with our voters. 30 years ago, most members of Congress who came to Washington had a sense of what the role of government should be. We no longer see that in our candidates anymore. It's all about the issues. It's about their position on issues. And I think that has changed in this election a great deal on how we approach the issues.
What do you think will come out as the winner of this election?
The big move towards the Republicans that we saw in the spring that abated some with the abortion issue during the summer has come back full force. The other thing that has surfaced in this campaign that is, I think, a little bit different because of the economic issues is that normally what you have in a presidential year in this country, about 70% of eligible voters vote. In a non-presidential year, only about 40% vote. The two biggest areas where there's a drop off the vote is, number one, the youth vote, which the Democrats keep trying to change in this election and tried to, particularly on the abortion issue, with some success. But the other is ticket splitters. And what we've seen this year is ticket splitters, a group of the ticket splitters have been much more engaged than normally for an off-year election. And it's coming from those voters concerned about the economy. So we're all actually getting a bonus score for our focus on the economy going into the election. Right now, I think most everyone has kind of resolved themselves with the fact Republicans are probably going to win the House of Representatives. I think election night is going to be a much bigger night than people are projecting.
So a red wave?
I think it's going to end up somewhere. We're currently at 211. You need 218 for control. And I think we're going to be somewhere north of 235. 237, 238 was my count as of last night.
The Democrats really need to focus right now and get out the vote. We have been very successful in most states in the early vote. We bank our votes early. So one thing your viewers should be aware of, a lot of states count the votes that are cast that day first. So we could start the evening out behind and then catch up with some of those states with the absentee vote, like in the presidential election. I think we hold the Senate, but I think there are a lot of toss-up races out there. And I think Georgia will go into a runoff, which is a second election. You have to get 50% in Georgia to win, and there's a third-party candidate. So they'll run again as they did in 2020. And then I think, I still think we're going to be even or ahead. And I think there'll be some surprises on both sides, frankly, as voters are pretty upset with incumbents right now. I would remind your viewers that President Biden is more popular in all of the swing states than the Republicans in Congress are. So voters in U.S. are pretty unhappy with everybody right now. And you will get some surprise outsider candidates who are going to win that no one saw coming. I think there's no president better equipped to deal with divided government. Joe Biden really understands the levers of government. He really believes in negotiation. He had hoped to be working together more bipartisanly already. He's successfully passed his big packages. So I think we're moving from big packages to small action. But, you know, we ought to be able to find common ground, and he will want to do that for sure.
If there's any one thing I would say about our party, particularly, and this applies to the ex-president, is that I want our party to be for something, not talk about what we're against. And I think if we can put a legislative agenda to throw out there that is about what we're for, and then throw it out to the president to find a bipartisan compromise on it, I think we'll have a good 2 years, and it may set us up for what happens presidentially in the next election. You know, there is a sense, I think it is a threat to democracy to do it. It's something that I get very concerned sometimes. A lot of the speeches I give in Republican audiences, that when I talk about what we've done well, what we've not done well, where we stand, there's always one or two people that interrupt and scream out, well, they stole the election. They didn't steal the election. I don't believe they did. I think you look at all the evidence that is there. But it is interesting. You have not a plurality, but a lot more people believe that the election was wrong beyond just Republicans.
Your viewers may not recognize what a brave thing Ed just said. Frankly, it's very brave to come out and say.
Two things I say about the cheating is, number one, is we had a very good year down ballot from Trump. We won more congressional seats, ended up with a very tight balance. I did both the Georgia races and the runoff in those Senate races in 2020. We went into a recount. We lost both of those. We lost control of the Senate because of Donald Trump, because he was hammering on the election being stolen, and we had 285,000 Republicans who voted in the general election who didn't vote in the runoff. He cost us those 2 seats in control. And I tell people, go back and look at the ballots. If they were cheating, then why did we down ballot win those congressional seats, win those Senate seats, win those state legislative seats? If they're going to cheat, they're going to cheat all the way down the ballot. The other is Donald Trump started talking about the election maybe being stolen in 2016. That was his strategy.
Is political violence a problem in the American political system?
Oh, political violence is definitely a problem, and I think there are 3 forces that are of concern. First of all, if you just step back and look at the sociological studies, and we work with a Canadian firm called Environics that has looked at different long-term attitudinal changes. The proclivity for violence has increased quite a bit among our youth in the United States over the last 40 years. That's very, very concerning. We also have in the United States, and I'm from Montana, I was a competitive marksman, but we have way, way, way too many guns and weapons available to people. So there are a lot of structural problems. I definitely think there are threats on both sides, and I think both of our parties should be unified against this. But I also think you have to look at the degree to which Donald Trump, not the Republicans, Donald Trump encouraged this, promoted it, paid for it, planned it, made it legitimate, and that is very, very dangerous in our society, and we need to be united bipartisanly.
You know, I think what I call domestic terrorism is just as concerning as foreign terrorism, and we need to approach it that way.
Well, I think there's a new normal, then that new normal is very distressing. And Americans bipartisanly are very, very concerned about division in this country, very concerned about the polarization. Ironically, and thank you for your question, Ed and I just wrote a book that I'll share with your viewers, A Question of Respect, Bringing Us Together in a Deeply Divided Nation. And it's rooted in our personal experience, our working partnership. We've worked together for over 30 years, even though we're on opposite sides of the fence politically. And it talks about the influence of some things like campaign finance, social media, which we haven't talked about, which is very, very destructive and hard to figure out how to get under control. And I think Europe is more advanced in that than we are here in the United States and has figured it out better. And Ed will talk about the primary structures of our country, which are driving the polarization, reapportionment driving the polarization.
I always talk about the cynicism of voters in the United States, and the cynicism has come from lack of dealing with problems effectively, coming up with solutions because of the polarization. The problem with cynicism is a cynical voter who thinks they are being protective by being cynical actually becomes the most susceptible to demagoguery, whether it's demagoguery by a candidate, demagoguery in social media, demagoguery in the cable news, and quite frankly, anything after 8 o'clock at night on the 3 cable news programs is nothing but pure demagoguery. In 1990, if you go back and look at turnout in the primaries, it was about 35 to 40% of Republicans voted in the Republican primary, and 35 to 40% of Democrats voted in the Democrat primary. In 2020, it was less than 20% on both ends. It's almost half. And so what you have is both parties, because of the low turnout in the primaries, are providing candidates from the far right and the far left.
But I think the progressives and the moderates have been working more together. And, you know, we had such thin margins. We had to be united to get any of our packages passed. And certainly, some people thought it was a little bit too much, and some people wanted more. But I think we were remarkably cooperative.
Let's look forward for a second. I mean, because obviously when people in general watch these elections, they also think about 2024 and the next presidential election. So are the midterms at all a good indicator for what will happen in the next presidential races?
Well, on the Democratic side, we are certainly saying if you want to beat Trump in 2024, you better vote in 2022. So we are already trying to energize our base on that. You know, I'll be interested to see what Ed says on the Republican side. I think Joe Biden's going to beat Donald Trump again.
There are those of us that hope we move on from the president. I believe this may be the last election where the old guys play a major role. I think this country is ready for not a younger candidate, but a young candidate. And I think whichever party comes up with a young candidate who is charismatic, who is a positive populist, not a negative populist. I always hated when they called Trump a populist. He wasn't a populist. He played one group of people against the other. That's not what a populist does. He brings everyone in together. And I think whichever party does that for president, they will capture a majority of this country for a good 20, 30 years. And I don't know who that candidate is. I don't think that candidate will surface in this campaign. But I think for both parties, I think they may end this next campaign saying it's time to go a different route. It's time for a young candidate that becomes the John Kennedy of the next generation.
I do think Ed raises an interesting question, though, is where is our country going in terms of new leadership, which I think will be in 2028. We have a ton of people who can run. But I think we might have the first woman-woman contest, too, in 2028. The Republicans, for a while, were not nominating women at all. Now 70% of their candidates are women, people of color, vets.
There is one difference between our politics and European. Obviously, we only have two parties. Americans have a habit of liking to choose between two. We always want to choose between two sports teams. We always want to choose
so
between.
True.
It's just so built into our system. And quite frankly, it's one of the roles we play as pollsters. And one of the reasons why you don't see what you see in Europe is new parties to develop around an issue. Is our radar is constantly on. We're always looking for new issues that are popping up as a concern, and then we try to incorporate it into our party's agenda. That's part of what we're responsible for, is making sure there's no surprises out there. The bigger question is, are we going to start moving back to a group of candidates in this country that come here with a common belief of what the role of government should be, and start putting everything in that direction?
I think the United States remains kind of domestically focused. It's interesting, frankly, because we've never had, I think it's been a long time, probably since George Bush Sr., since we've had a president as knowledgeable and oriented toward the world scene. We have problems now that are more intertwined with the world than we've ever had before. But Americans remain remarkably parochial.
And I mean, the question of respect is, of course, a very interesting book, I think, to read after the election. And it's interesting, of course, also from a German, if I may say, also social democratic perspective, because the German Chancellor, Olaf Scholz, ran his election campaign on the issue, or on the question of respect, and to instill respect for people, for everyone in society, into politics as his crucial theme. And it's, I mean, of course, respect in the political culture would be something that I think we all wish for the future in American politics. And thank you again to our viewers for being with us today. I hope you enjoyed the conversation and stay with us. Thank you very much.